Hi, my name's Stuart Lynch, and this is my third video in the How to Use MongoDB's Realm in your SwiftUI projects. This video is sponsored by AppFigures. AppFigures makes tracking the business side of your apps like downloads and revenue a breeze, while also helping you to grow your downloads with very intuitive tools for App Store optimization and for competitive intelligence. And it's not just the tools. Ariel from AppFigures shares guides, tutorials, and even hosts live streams to teach you how to promote your app. I also recommend checking out his YouTube channel for weekly news about apps. AppFigures helps you spend less time tracking and more time developing. Sign up with my code, Stuart3030, to get 30% off your first 3 months. Links are in the description below. Thanks again to AppFigures for sponsoring this video. Realm's a NoSQL database much like Firebase Firestore. It's not the traditional relational database model like MySQL or PostreSQL. However, that doesn't mean you can't create one-to-many or many-to-many type relationships with Realm. In this video, we'll be introducing a new list element that allows you to create a one-to-many relationship from one model to another. And we'll also introduce inverse relationships to provide backlinks from the many back to the one using LinkingObjects. This is a continuation of the Realm playlist, and if you've not already watched the first 2 videos in this series, I recommend that you do. A link to both are in the description below. I love getting your feedback, so tap the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video and leave a comment below. Make sure you subscribe to the video and ring that bell to get notifications of new videos. To save a little time, I've created a starter project for this video that you can also download from the link in the description below. I've added an app icon along with a launch screen, as I always do now for my videos, and I've added 2 things to the onAppear of our content view. One which will print out the location of the documents directory so we can view the Realm database in Realm Studio, and another that will set a user defaults value to suppress the constraints warning you get if you're using a navigation view in SwiftUI. Other than that, there are no code additions, so if you want to start with a new project on your own, you can do that, and you can just add this code in the onAppear function. Well, this is what we're going to be building by the time we finish this 2-part project. It's a simple application that will allow us to add countries to one of the views in a tab view and edit inline, including adding a country flag. You'll be able to add cities to that country just like I'm doing here. We'll also be adding an edit feature that allows you to move those rows in the city list, and this is all easy with Realm. As you update the cities for a country, the city count on the list updates automatically. All CRUD operations are included. And then that second tab is the inverse relationship, where you see all of the cities and their associated country. So the first thing that we have to do is to add the Realm Swift SDK, and I went over this in the first video of the series. And the repository link is in the description below. So the first thing that we need to do is to create our 2 models, one for the country and one for cities. So first the country model. So let's create a folder group called models. And inside that group, create a Swift file called country. Import Realm Swift. Create a new class called country that conforms to the object type for Realm, and because we want to be able to display our countries in a list, we'll conform it to the object key identifiable protocol. This will require a persisted primary key that we can call ID that is of type object ID. Next, for now, let's just create a single persisted property that will be the country name, which will be a string. And finally, we'll create a convenience initializer that will allow us to create new countries by simply passing in the string value for the name. We want to create a city model that is almost identical, except that the model name will be city instead of country. So let's just copy this code from the import Realm+Swift down, and I'll create a new file that I'll call city, and I'll paste that code in. Now all I have to do is change the model name to city. I can return now to the country model and add one more persisted property, and this will represent a list of cities that our country will have. A list is a class representing a to-many relationship in Realm models. Each country will have many cities, so we need to specify that our list will be of type city. Now we need to create our views in order to be able to present our countries. So what I'm going to do is refactor content view and call it country list view, because that's where I'm going to be starting. So let's create a new group from this selected file now and call it views. Now let's import Realm+Swift, and then I can use the Realm observed results for country to create a countries variable that I can use to iterate over for our list of countries. I'm going to take a different approach than I did in the last video. This time, I'm going to create a navigation bar button that will allow us to create a new entry right away that we can update after it's been created. This is not necessarily better, it's just a different approach that potentially has the problem of leaving some empty names in your data if you don't catch those. So first, let's replace the body with a navigation view. Inside that view, I'll create a VStack where the first item in the VStack checks to see if the country's results is empty. If it is, I'm going to present a text view telling the user to tap on a plus button that will add to the navigation bar in just a second. I can use string interpolation here to embed a system image right within the string for this text view. Now I want to push this up to the top so I can add a spacer below. Now if the country's result is not empty, i.e. there are some countries already, I'll create a list that will iterate through each country, and I'll do that above the spacer. I'll leave the view empty for now, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. I want to set the list row separator to hidden, and set the list style to plain. Let me just collapse this VStack for a second. I'm going to attach a navigation title to this, and it will be countries. Next, I'm going to create a toolbar, and it will have a single toolbar item with a placement of navigation bar trailing. And this will be a button, and it'll be a button with an image label, and that will be the system image of a plus.circle.fill. I'll set the size of that symbol to be a font size that is Title 2. For the action then, I can simply append a new country object to our country's results. Now I've created that convenience initializer, but since I don't have any name yet, I will just use the initializer without the name property here, and then accept the default, which is an empty string. For our country row view, in order to do inline editing, that text view has to be bound to some variable. And we'll be adding more properties eventually to this row, so let's break it out into a new view where we can pass in the country iterator. And when we do that, we can designate it as an observed realm object, which can then be bound to a text view. So let's do that. We'll create a new SwiftUI view in the Views group, and I'll call it Country Row View. I'll import Realm Swift, and then create that observed realm object that we can call country, and we have to specify the type, which is country. And we can fix the preview provider by passing in a sample country, but this time we'll use the convenience initializer, and we'll just pass in my country, Canada. You can choose whatever you want. Next, in the body, create a text field using new country for the placeholder, and then bind it to that country's .name. Then we can set the text field style to a rounded border, add some padding, and set the frame to a height of 30. We can return to our countries list view now, and we can use it in our list. Did you notice that, unlike our first example, the preview is now working? I can get into preview mode now, and if I tap on the plus button, a new country row is entered. And I could, if Xcode let me start, enter text, I could enter the country name. The problem is that it's broken in the current version of Xcode that I'm using, so I'm going to have to run in the simulator anyway. Also, the realm that is created is hidden somewhere in the simulator device file, so if I wanted to inspect it, it would take more work to find it. Whereas we already have a path where when we run the app, we see it in the console. So I'm going to stick to running on the simulator, even if this bug is fixed. So let's run it now. I can see that it's indicating in the simulator that there are no countries. So I can tap on the plus button, and a new entry is created. If I tap in the text view, the keyboard appears, and I can enter a country name. I'll enter Canada. If I tap the return button, the keyboard dismisses. Now this may or may not be intuitive to your user, so we might want to add a dismiss button on the keyboard. In doing so, you'll learn how to pass a focus state to another view. Before we do that though, let's reveal the path of our realm. We can right-click on this and choose Open from the service menu. We can then double-click on the Realm file to open Realm Studio. We covered all of this in the previous video. We now see two models on the left, one for city and one for country. City has no entries yet, while country has one. There's that unique object ID and the string for the name with Canada in it. As for cities, it's empty. Not surprising, we haven't added any. So let's add in that focus field now. The problem is that we want to present the dismiss button on our keyboard toolbar, but it's in the contents list view, and our field is in a different view. So we'll need to pass in the focus state property as a binding so that it can trigger the dismissal of the keyboard. So first we'll create a new focus state property in countries list view. We'll call it isFocused as an optional Boolean property, just like in the last video. Next, I'll add a toolbar item group to our toolbar, but this time with a placement of keyboard. Inside that group, I'm going to create an H stack so that I can push a button to the right. So I'll start with the spacer. And then for the button, I'll use an image with a system name that is the keyboard.chevron.compact.down. And then for the action, when it's tapped, we want to set the isFocused to nil. Now we'll need to pass this then to the country row view. So first, let's go to country row view to add a focus state. And we'll create it exactly the same way, not as a binding, but as a focus state, which is an optional Boolean. And then we can attach the focused modifier to the text field that binds it to isFocused with a value equals true. Now when we return to our countries list view, we have to pass in that focus state. And we do that when we present the row, and we'll use an underscore to indicate that it represents a binding. If I test this in the simulator now, let's just see what happens. When I tap in the field, the keyboard is displayed, and I see that dismiss button in the top right of the keyboard. When I tap it, the focus gets dismissed and the keyboard disappears. So let's do two more things before we move on to creating our cities view. First, I'd like to set the sort order on our countries list. And I can do that in the for each loop, specifying that countries is sorted by key path and that the key path is name. With it being sorted here, I can also add some animation, so as I add new countries, it will animate in, and we can specify the animation as default, watching for countries as I add new ones and as I change the title. Let me test now and add some new countries. They'll always get added to the top because it's got no text entry. But as I start to enter the name, it will nicely move into location. For example, United States moves to the end. Let me create a new one. I'll specify Great Britain, and it moves to be between Canada and the US. One more thing here. The final thing that we're going to do in this video is to create our cities list and add some cities to our countries. I would like then at a glance to see how many cities I have for each country. Well, it turns out that this is easy because the list property has a count property. So return to the country row view now and embed the text field in an H stack. Add a spacer and another text view that simply has the countries.cities.count as a string interpolation, and then add the word cities. If we test once more, we see that our countries have no cities. Not surprising. Let's fix that now. I'm going to create the cities list view in the same way that I created the to-do list view in the to-do app that we created in the last set of videos, except that this time I'm going to be passing in the country and access the list property to iterate over. So in the views folder, create a new SwiftUI file and call it cities list view. Import Realm Swift. Add an observed Realm object that will be our country that we'll be passing in. And then we can fix the preview by adding in a country like Canada. We'll be adding a text view to this list so that we can create and edit inline. So create another state variable called name and make it an empty string. We want to be able to monitor the focus state here as well, so one more focus state property. Again, we'll call it isFocused and set it to be an optional Boolean. This view will be pushed onto the navigation stack from our country list row and present a list of all the cities for that country. And we'll be able to add a new city to the country from here. So create a VStack, and inside the VStack, create an HStack. The first entry in the HStack is that text field with the string placeholder, new city, that will bind to the text, which is the name state property. Let's ensure that this text field's focus observes the focus state when isFocused is equal to true. And I'll also set the text field style to be a rounded border style. We'll add a spacer so that we can add a button right to the right. And it looks like preview isn't working again, so let me just dismiss this preview for now. And the view should be familiar to you as we created one just like this in the last to-do app. So to add that button, it will allow us to add a new city. And that button is going to have an image label, which will use the system name of plus.circle.fill. I'm going to disable the button if we don't have any text in our name view. For the action, we'll create a new city using the convenience initializer to pass in the name that was that value entered in that text field. Then we can append it to the country.cities list with the append function. And then I can reset the name back to an empty string and set the focus back to nil to dismiss the keyboard. And then add some padding all around. Now we can present the list where we'll iterate with a for each over the country's cities that'll provide us with the city as the iterated value. Here we'll just present the city.name as a static text view. We can add an onDelete function where we can perform the country.cities remove function to delete it. How about adding a list row separator of hidden? And I'll set the list style to plain. And then as we did in the previous list, we can add a remove with animation using a default animation, watching for changes on our countries.cities. Since we've been pushed onto a navigation stack, we can add a title, and we'll use the country name for that title. But I only want a small navigation bar, so we'll set the title display mode to inline. And let's also add that toolbar dismiss button on the keyboard. So I can create a toolbar, and we can go back to the countries list view and just copy that toolbar item group. I should really create a code snippet for this because I use this all the time. And we can just paste it in as our toolbar item group. Now we'll need to provide a navigation link from the countries list to the corresponding list of cities when we tap on a row. So we'll need to go back to our countries list view and enclose that country row view within a navigation link. And the destination will simply be that cities list view that we just created. And we can pass in the iterated country as the country. And then the label will be the entire country row view. Let's test. Let's add some cities. For Canada, I'll add 2 cities, Vancouver and Toronto. If I return now to the countries list view, I see that the country count is now 2 for Canada. Perfect. Let me add 2 more cities, but this time for Great Britain. How about London and Glasgow? Again, returning to the countries list view, we see that the count is updated for that country as well. Let's check out Realm Studio. So let's use the link in our console to open the Realm Studio to see our database. First, I see that the city class has 4 city objects, but there's no apparent association back to the country. And we'll see how we can sort this out in the next video. Going back to country, however, I see that both show for Canada and Great Britain each has 2 cities. And if I tap on one of the cities lists, like this one for Canada, I'm shown the 2 Canadian cities. There's my one-to-many relationship. I can even add a new city here, like Calgary. And I can do this because what we're doing here is exactly what we were doing in code. I'm adding a new city to the list of cities for Canada. If I go back now and run the app, I see that indeed the city has been linked and displays for Canada. If I return to Realm Studio and go to the city class, I can add new cities here, but because I add from the cities class, there is no way right here to link it back to the country. Well, that's enough for this video. In the next video, we'll cover how we can delete countries, because we need to be able to know if there are any cities attached to that country. And then I'll show you how you can move cities within the list. And finally, how to add a new property to an already existing realm. And that's going to require a migration. Thanks to AppFigures for sponsoring this series, and I'll see you in the next video.